permitted within the park. Or it could be downsized, which would be a reduction in size. Or finally, it could be degazetted, which is a fancy term for just eliminated and losing its protected status entirely. So collectively, we know these three events as protected area downgrading, downsizing, and degazettement. And it really has had a huge impact on the globe. We know of at least 478 protected areas being affected by PAD within 58 countries. Research is ongoing on this topic, and so you can see some blank spots on the map. This doesn't necessarily mean that PAD doesn't exist here. It may mean that we just haven't researched it well enough, or that there aren't many protected areas to begin with, or that there's not much PAD. I'd like to point out a few things on this map. So India, you can see here, has a lot of enacted downgrade events. Much of this was due to the government allowing more subsistence harvest within all of its protected areas. You can also see quite a bit in the US, which I'll explain next. So this shows all of the currently proposed PAD events in the world. And the US really stands out here because of two main bills that are currently being debated. One of them is a bill to allow Native American communities to extract resources from any protected area, regardless of its current use level. Another is national security bills, which aim to allow development within protected areas, especially in border regions. So with our study, we chose to focus on Brazil, and that's mainly because Brazil is truly a global leader in protected areas. Being only one country, it has 12% of the global total of all protected areas. And during the decade of 2000 to 2010, Brazil was responsible for 70% of all protected area creation. So they really do deserve credit for that. But there's also evidence pointing to the fact that Brazil may be undermining these gains by enacting PAD. But before this study, we only knew of 2 events in Brazil. So I wanted to research this more. So specifically, I wanted to know how have these legal changes, how has PAD affected Brazil's conservation landscape and their protected area system? And also, what kind of impacts have these had on the ground, specifically on Brazil's forests? So I started off by collecting data on all of the PAD events in Brazil, created a database with collecting over 20 variables for each event, documenting its legal documentation, its location and area affected, also cause. And then I mapped all of these events' spatial extent in ArcGIS, and I uploaded all of this data to padtracker.org, and so you can actually visit this website and find all of my data there. So some results from this, I found that PAD is actually very common in Brazil. It's happened at least 126 times. 66 of these events have been enacted, and another 60 are proposed. These events have affected over 91 protected areas and over 295,000 square kilometers. That's an area the size of Italy. So it's really significant, and this is about 1/5 of Brazil's total protected area extent. We also can see that PAD has most greatly affected the Amazon biome right here, and also the Cerrado biome, which is a dry tropical forest, which is primarily used for agriculture right now. Nationwide, we found that PAD has resulted in the complete elimination of 6% of its historic protected land area. This is through either being downsized or having the park degazetted. And we also know that these PAD events are increasing over time. It's becoming fairly common. Over 70% of these events have happened just in the last few years, since 2005. These events have been caused primarily by hydropower. Somebody really wants to get a hold of us. So hydropower development is becoming very common in the Amazon, and it's driving a lot of these PAD events. Another big reason is that the populations in the Amazon, like we learned earlier, are expanding. And so rural human settlements living both within these protected areas and around them are driving efforts to alter their protected status. So knowing all this, I then wanted to know how specifically does PAD impact forest cover, which is one of the primary indicators for conservation success in the tropics. So to do this, I used this amazing data set, which you guys should definitely look up. It's freely available, it's online, it's by Matthew Hansen from the University of Maryland and his collaborators. And it shows deforestation from the year 2000 until 2012 at a 30-meter resolution, which I think is amazing. So on this map, every red pixel shows a 30-meter by 30-meter plot of land that was forest in the year 2000 and was deforested by 2012. And so you can see some really striking patterns in the boreal forest here, so in Russia and China, and in Indonesia. and also in the Amazon, which is where I focused. So using this data set, I compared deforestation rates among 3 different land types: padded, protected, and never protected lands. So I'll explain this with an example. So let's go to Bom Futuro National Forest in southwestern Brazil. This national forest was created in 1988 in an area that has rapidly expanding populations and that are especially reliant on cattle ranching. So ever since, it's faced high land use pressures from people living both within the reserve illegally and around it. It was first proposed to be downsized by an unknown extent in the year 2000, and then again in 2008 and 2009, 2 separate bills proposed to degazette it entirely in order to return that land to cattle ranching use. And then finally in 2010, the area in red here was downsized. It was just cut out of the park. So a federal law, in effect, converted this national forest to just 35% of its original size. So for the spatial analysis of this specific park, I compared deforestation rates in its protected, padded, or downsized, and never protected land. And I chose this never protected land as a 25-kilometer buffer around the original protected area. And I did this because I wanted to compare deforestation rates in an area that was nearby, but that completely lacked conservation protections. And I chose the buffer region of 25 kilometers because previous studies have showed that deforestation rates are similar in 25, 50, and 75 kilometers around protected areas in the Brazilian Amazon. So I then used the deforestation data set to compare deforestation rates among these 3 land types, and I defined a rate as a total forest lost divided by the total forest area as of 2000. So what did I find? Bom Futuro was greatly deforested, sadly. Its downsized area was 43% deforested. It lost 1/4 of its forest area over that time. Compare this to only 10% of the protected area losing its forest. And the downsized area was even more deforested than the area surrounding it, which was never even protected. And so we really can see that the downsized area was deforested rapidly and to a large extent. So going beyond just Bom Futuro, when I looked at all of the downsized areas within the Amazon, I found that on average they were deforested at rates 144 times greater than areas that retained their conservation protections over this time. So then to get a broader view, step back, you can still see Bom Futuro actually in this little area right here. And I looked at deforestation rates in all of the padded areas within the Amazon and compared this to rates in all of the protected areas in the Amazon, which you can see here in green, and all of the never protected areas, these buffer zones, seen here in orange. So I found even more striking results with this analysis. From 2000 to 2012, padded areas were more than 18 times more deforested than protected areas, and even more than 2 times as much as areas that were never protected at all. So these results show that, by all accounts, when an area loses legal protections, its deforestation rates are significantly increased, to the point that you're even losing all of these conservation gains that you've previously gained from having this area protected. So some implications for this. We know that PAD, because of its impacts on deforestation and the protected area network, is significantly undermining Brazil's ability to meet these political agreements they have regarding the environment and conservation. One of these is the International Convention on Biodiversity, which requires member countries to maintain a 17% protected area coverage. And Brazil would be doing better at this rate if they were not enacting PAD. It also undermines their ability to meet their own national deforestation control plan, which specifically focuses on the Amazon. We also can expect that PAD will increase in the coming years due to planned development projects within the Amazon. So in the Brazil, as in the US, a lot of times government agencies don't work together when they're planning. And this map here shows planned hydroelectric dam projects for the Amazon region. And currently the Brazilian Energy Department has made plans to build dams in areas that overlap directly with at least 17 currently protected areas. This is illegal by Brazil's own laws, and they've made no explanation as how they will do this. And so therefore we can assume that these protected areas will be moved, weakened, or just eliminated entirely in order to accommodate this development. So some recommendations arising out of this. In Brazil, to create a protected area is very difficult. It's a lengthy process. It's defined in their constitution. It requires technical studies and public consultations. Yet after it's created, to pad it, so to eliminate it, weaken it, etc., simply requires passing a bill in Congress, which can be fairly easy to do depending on the political climate. And so with that, we really believe that PAD should have binding and very transparent legal policies and processes, just like its creation. So any proposal to downgrade, downsize, or degazette a protected area really should require these studies, public consultations, and especially the simplest thing, be required to produce a map. To do our study, we had to sort through dozens and dozens of pages of legal documents, such as these, which list GPS coordinates in sentence format and produce no map whatsoever. And then I had to input these into GIS simply to see what they were proposing to change. And when this is so difficult, it's obvious that the public is not going to have a sense of what their representatives are proposing to do to their favorite parks. So now that you all know about PAD, you understand the acronym, I really encourage you to get involved. Visit padtracker.org. It's a great website. You can do a lot of things here. So you can add data as you learn of new PAD events. You can also download the entire data set because there still really are a lot of questions that need answering. We don't know what drives PAD, for example. So was Bon Futuro, was it deforested so much because it was already vulnerable to this legal change, or did the deforestation drive the legal change? We don't know what the causality is here. You can also, on this website, track and monitor your favorite protected areas. So, for example, I can enter in Iguazu National Park, and it'll send me an email when I find out that Iguazu National Park is currently facing its third proposal to be downsized in order to build a road bisecting the park. And so often these bills, they're not advertised, and so it's hard to find out about what's happening to these parks. And PAD Tracker is a great way to do that. So this bill in Iguazu is just one of 27 that the Brazilian Congress is currently debating, actively debating. And if these all passed, it would eliminate an area over 60,000 square kilometers, which is about the size of West Virginia. These are significant changes, and I encourage you all to learn more and get involved to help shape the future of your favorite parks. So with that, I thank you all for listening. I think I have some time for
questions. Two brief questions I think we have time for.
Okay, really interesting talk. Regarding the Hansen data set, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but that is a data set built by a global model on a global scale, right? And I remember when they announced the data set, which was very exciting for all of us. They were really curious about how well it performed at these finer scales, like at what you're working at. So I'm wondering if you did any verification or looked at other data sets to triangulate that information.
Yeah, I have good faith in the data set, and I'm kind of waiting to have more publications review it because I think it is becoming very popularly used. I did not personally do verifications or any ground control points, but he does in his paper, and I believe he has the verification process laid out in that paper. With my collaborators in Brazil, they were able to kind of verify some of the results I was seeing, and they agreed with what I was finding. So I think in general, I trust the data set, but we'll wait to see what the scientific community has to say. So far, it's good.
One more question.
A great talk. Something I'm just interested in terms of the way that PAD is being categorized. So I just feel like the threats to biodiversity from downgrading in Brazil, like you were describing, are really clear and really urgent. But if you're going to include the changes in America where we're reinstating rights that really don't pose such a huge risk to biodiversity, I wonder if there's a way I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. To me, it feels like an important distinction to make.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's very easy to demonize PAD, to say that it's always going to be a bad thing. But so the World Wildlife Fund created this PAD project, I think about 7 years ago. And they have very documented criteria of what the specific causes of PAD events are. One of these is conservation planning. And so we actually have instances of these PAD events being enacted in order to improve the conservation network, or also to restore rights to traditional communities where protected areas have taken that from them. And so it's certainly not necessarily a bad thing. I think from what I found in Brazil, it was easier for me to make the judgment that the outcomes are bad and it's being done in a very ad hoc manner without public notice. But I think in general, PAD can be a good thing, and it should be researched and seen as such.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.